You have no right to speak the truth. The chilling words hissed like venom from my ex-partner still echo in the darkest corners of my mind. They've been a relentless torment, a suffocating blanket over my voice. For years, those words that threat kept me silent, paralyzed by fear and the weight of his manipulation. But something shifted. A flicker of defiance ignited within me, growing steadily into an inferno. Because today that suffocating blanket is finally being ripped away. Today the truth, my truth, is no longer a whisper in the dark. It's a roar, and I am ready to unleash it, no matter the cost. If you believe in the power of truth, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and join us as we uncover more stories of courage and justice. My name is Hazel. Not long ago, I was trapped in a suffocating relationship with Mark, a man who meticulously controlled every facet of my life. He was a master manipulator, slowly eroding my self-worth until I barely recognized myself. He isolated me from friends and family, convinced me that my perceptions were flawed, and systematically denied any reality that didn't align with his twisted narrative. When I stumbled upon his dark secrets, actions that would shatter his meticulously crafted facade, he threatened me, crushing my spirit and forcing me into a terrifying silence. Escaping that toxic web was just the first step. The real battle began when I had to confront the lingering shadows of fear and the profound loss of trust in myself and others, and in the very idea of justice. And that silence, that fear would shape the new path I was forced to forge. The silence I mentioned, it wasn't just the absence of my voice. It was the deafening roar of his control. Mark was a master at chipping away at my self-worth. Every opinion I had, every small triumph I celebrated, he'd subtly or not so subtly belittle. That's a nice idea, but I think this would be better. Oh, you got a promotion. Well, it's probably just because they needed to fill a quota. He made me feel like my achievements were insignificant, my thoughts invalid, and my very existence a mild inconvenience. I was constantly walking on eggshells, desperate for a shred of his approval, a glimmer of recognition that I was enough. But it never came. Instead, he'd shower me with just enough affection to keep me hooked, a classic tactic to ensure I stayed within his orbit, constantly seeking validation from the very person who denied it. He isolated me so gradually that I barely noticed it happening. First, it was gentle suggestions. Do you really want to spend time with Sarah? She's so negative. Then it became more direct. I don't think your family understands us. Maybe we should just stick to ourselves for a while. Soon, my social circle dwindled to just him, and my world became increasingly small, confined to the boundaries he set. I lost touch with the vibrant, independent woman I once was. She was replaced by a shell, a reflection of his desires, constantly questioning her own sanity. Every time I tried to assert myself, to push back against his suffocating grip, he'd turn it around, making me feel guilty, selfish, or irrational. Why are you always so dramatic, Hazel? Can't you just be happy? He'd say, his voice dripping with feigned concern, while his eyes held a cold, calculating glint. The darkest part was the constant gaslighting. My memories, my feelings, my reality, all became subject to his arbitrary truths. If I brought up something he said that hurt me, he'd deny it vehemently. I never said that, Hazel. You're imagining things. Or, you're too sensitive. You twist everything. This constant invalidation made me doubt myself to my core. I started to believe I was truly flawed, that my perceptions were warped, and that I deserved his dismissive treatment. The emotional abuse was insidious, leaving no physical scars, but carving deep wounds into my psyche. I became a prisoner in my own mind, constantly replaying conversations, trying to decipher what was real and what was merely a fabrication of his making. The anger festered, a silent internal scream that no one could hear, fueled by the injustice of it all. I was trapped in a cage of his making, feeling utterly helpless and alone. Then came the discovery. It was a mundane Tuesday evening, and he'd left his laptop open. A curious glance, a fleeting moment of weakness, led me down a rabbit hole of emails and documents that exposed a completely different side of him. He wasn't just a controlling partner. He was involved in something far more sinister, a web of deceit that hinted at corruption and illicit dealings. My stomach dropped. The man I thought I knew, the man who had systematically dismantled me, was a criminal. When I confronted him, his calm facade shattered. The threats began immediately, chillingly direct. If you breathe a word of this, Hazel, I'll make sure you regret it. I'll destroy your reputation. No one will believe you, and I'll make sure you have nothing left. His words weren't idle. I knew he had the power, the connections to back them up, so I stayed silent. The fear of his retaliation was a heavy chain around my neck, binding me to his secret, to his silence. Breaking free from Mark was an act of sheer will, a desperate scramble for air after years of drowning. But the escape didn't mean freedom from the pain. It simply meant the battle moved from external control to internal turmoil. I was left with a profound sense of emptiness, a gaping wound where my trust and self-worth used to be. The thought of ever speaking my mind, of ever truly being heard, felt impossible. How could I, after being told for so long that my voice was worthless, that my truth was a lie? I bore the weight of his secrets, the emotional scars of his abuse, and the overwhelming fear that he might still come for me. The injustice burned within me, a constant dull ache that threatened to consume me. This raw pain, this burning sense of injustice, would become the unlikely fuel for my transformation. The suffocating silence I had endured wasn't a defeat. It was the crucible in which my transformation began. I refused to let Mark's toxic grip define me. Instead, I channeled every ounce of that injustice, every flicker of the anger and profound sadness, into a singular, unyielding purpose to amplify the voices of the silenced. I enrolled in night courses, devoured textbooks on journalism ethics and investigative techniques, and interned at a small independent news outlet known for its gritty, no-holds-barred reporting. It was a brutal, thankless grind filled with countless late nights cold calls and the constant sting of rejection. I chased leads down dead ends, navigated labyrinthine bureaucracies, and faced the cynicism of a world often unwilling to listen to uncomfortable truths. But with every small victory, a neglected victim finally getting their story heard, a local official exposed for minor corruption, a deep, resonant part of me healed. I was no longer the shrinking, insecure Hazel Mark had meticulously crafted. I was becoming the Hazel, the one who relentlessly pursued justice, who refused to cower in the face of intimidation, a tenacious investigative journalist whose reputation for integrity and courage steadily grew. My work, driven by an almost obsessive need to right wrongs, had pulled me deep into the treacherous currents surrounding Aegis Solutions. On the surface, they presented a pristine, glossy image, a global consulting powerhouse promising innovative solutions and ethical practices. But beneath that polished veneer, a chilling narrative began to emerge. Whispers of backroom deals, allegations of systematic fraud, and the disquieting disappearance of whistleblowers shadowed their every move. For nearly a year, I had been meticulously building my case piece by painstaking piece. I followed convoluted money trails, cross-referenced shell corporations, and cultivated a network of cautious, fearful sources who in hushed tones hinted at the true nature of Aegis's operations. The deeper I plunged, the more intricate and insidious the web of deceit appeared, hinting at a ruthless efficiency that bordered on the terrifying. I felt like I was closing in, the scent of a major exposé hanging thick in the air, a thrilling mix of anticipation and dread. Then it happened. It was late, well past midnight, my apartment lit only by the cold glow of my monitor. I was sifting through a massive cache of encrypted files, a desperate last-ditch effort to find the missing link. Hour after hour, names, dates, and obscure project codes blurred before my eyes. Just as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm me, a single internal memo buried deep within a seemingly innocuous subdirectory flashed across the screen. My eyes scanned the dense text, a blur of corporate jargon and unfamiliar acronyms, until a name clear as day leaped out, ripping through the quiet of the night: Mark Peterson. My breath hitched. The air caught in my throat. My heart didn't just pound, it slammed against my ribs, a frantic, disbelieving drumbeat. Mark. Here. It couldn't be. The man who had been the architect of my deepest fears, the tormentor who had tried to silence me forever, was not just an obscure name in a document. The memo, stark and undeniably clear, identified him as a senior executive within Aegis Solutions, specifically tasked with strategic damage control and reputation management for some of their most ethically dubious ventures. The universe, it seemed, had a cruel, sardonic sense of humor. The very corruption I was battling was intricately tied to the man who embodied my past trauma. The realization was a visceral blow, a cold wave of shock, followed by a burning inferno of rage. This wasn't just a professional case anymore. It was a devastatingly personal one. The Aegis Solutions investigation, which I had poured my heart and soul into, wasn't just about exposing corporate malfeasance. It was about him. The very secrets I was chasing, the systemic injustices I sought to rectify, were being orchestrated or shielded by the man who had systematically dismantled my spirit. And the deeper I dug, cross-referencing Mark's reported activities within Aegis with my existing evidence, the more horrifying the truth became. I unearthed irrefutable proof: financial records, intercepted communications, and sworn affidavits from terrified former employees that Mark was the mastermind behind the cover-up of a catastrophic environmental scandal. He had orchestrated the suppression of scientific data, bribed regulatory officials, and intimidated countless community leaders and activists, leaving entire regions poisoned and generations suffering. His chilling threats, once directed solely at me in the confines of our relationship, were now being weaponized against entire populations, against the very fabric of truth and justice. The revelation hit me like a physical force. On one hand, it validated every painful memory, every shattered piece of my past self. The subtle manipulations, the gaslighting, the control, it was all a prelude to his larger, more dangerous game. On the other hand, this grotesque discovery ignited a fire within me, a furious, unyielding resolve. This wasn't just a story anymore. It was an inescapable confrontation. This wasn't just about seeking justice for anonymous victims. It was about finally, definitively breaking the chains of fear Mark had forged around my very soul. The stakes were impossibly high. My career, my safety, possibly even my life hung in the balance. But so did the truth. I knew with a clarity that pierced through all fear that I had to expose him, not just for the countless voiceless victims of Aegis Solutions, but for the girl I used to be, the one he had tried to silence forever. This wasn't merely a professional obligation. It was a deeply personal mission of liberation. The final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, setting the stage for an explosive confrontation where the weight of my past would clash with the power of my present. The air in the grand ballroom was thick with anticipation. Hundreds of journalists' cameras, flashing microphones extended like hungry beasts, were all focused on the podium. This was it. the culmination of months, years, even, of relentless digging, of sacrificing everything to uncover the truth. My heart pounded a drum solo in my chest, but it wasn't from fear. It was from a potent cocktail of adrenaline and righteous fury. I held the weight of countless lives in my hands. The victims of Aegis, the communities poisoned, the whistleblowers silenced. And more than that, I held my own shattered past, the echo of Mark's threats, the phantom pain of his control. This wasn't just a press conference. It was my reckoning, my chance to finally reclaim my voice, not just for myself, but for every person Mark had ever crushed. I clutched my notes, my fingers tracing the bolded names, the damning figures, the irrefutable evidence that would dismantle his empire. I took a deep breath, stepped up to the microphone, and saw the sea of expectant faces. My moment had arrived. Just as I began to speak, to utter the first words that would ignite the truth, a chillingly familiar voice cut through the murmuring crowd, amplified by the hall's acoustics. "Stop!" Every head snapped towards the source. My blood ran cold, a sudden icy shock rippling through my veins. There, striding confidently down the central aisle, flanked by 2 imposing security guards, was Mark. He looked perfectly composed, impeccably dressed, a predatory smile playing on his lips. His eyes, though, held a dangerous glint, a familiar coldness that sent a shiver down my spine. It was a calculated ambush, a theatrical entrance designed to seize control, to derail my carefully orchestrated unveiling. My carefully constructed composure threatened to crack. The room buzzed with confused whispers, camera flashes intensified, capturing the sudden, unexpected drama. Mark reached the foot of the stage, his gaze locking onto mine, a silent challenge passing between us. His smile widened, devoid of warmth. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice smooth and authoritative, projecting a false sense of concern. "I apologize for this interruption, but what you are about to hear is nothing more than a desperate attempt at personal revenge disguised as journalism." He then turned his full attention to me, his voice dropping through, still audible, laced with a venomous sweetness. "Hazel, darling, have you truly sunk so low, still trying to air our dirty laundry? Or is this just another one of your pathetic fabrications, just like all the others? The public accusation, the casual dismissal of my work, the blatant attempt to invalidate me in front of the world. It was a gut punch. My carefully constructed professional facade began to crumble under the weight of his calculated cruelty. He was playing his greatest hits, the gaslighting, the belittling, the public shaming. He painted me as an unstable, vindictive ex, consumed by a personal vendetta, not a journalist seeking truth. "She's unstable," he declared to the cameras, gesturing vaguely in my direction. "A jilted lover desperate for attention. She's fabricating evidence, twisting facts to satisfy her own bitter fantasies of retribution." He even hinted at past episodes, subtly suggesting mental instability, leveraging every one of my deepest insecurities that he had so meticulously fostered during our relationship. The accusations were a direct assault not just on my credibility, but on my very sanity, hitting every raw nerve he had ever exposed. He was stripping me bare, exposing my vulnerabilities, weaponizing my past trauma against me in the most public, humiliating way imaginable. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions, a cacophony of voices demanding answers. The air was thick with tension, a palpable sense of shock and confusion. My mind raced, grappling with the sheer audacity of his performance. The immediate response was a sickening wave of fear, the familiar dread that had plagued me for years. His words, his icy gaze conjured every moment of his control. Every instance he had made me doubt myself. A flash of a memory lying on the floor curled into a ball, while he calmly told me I was crazy for being upset. Another, his hand on my arm, squeezing just hard enough to leave a bruise as he whispered, "No one will believe you." The physical tremors began my hands clammy, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. The public humiliation, the sheer audacity of his lies was overwhelming. My body remembered the fear, even if my mind was trying to fight it. But then, amidst the swirling chaos, a different sensation began to surface. Beneath the fear, a simmering heat, a slow burn that quickly ignited into a raging inferno. Anger. A pure, unadulterated fury that surged through my veins, chasing away the remnants of dread. How dare he? How dare he stand there after everything he had done and twist the narrative? Defile my name and continue to lie with such brazen indifference. I looked at his smug, self-satisfied face, and the decades of suppressed rage, of injustice, of silent suffering coalesced into a single overwhelming emotion. This wasn't just about me anymore. This wasn't just about my past. It was about all of it. His victims, the truth, the countless people he had silenced, abused, and exploited. My eyes swept across the room past the flashing lights and the gaping mouths of the reporters past Mark's sneering face. And then I saw them. The faces in the crowd, not just journalists, but some of the individuals who had bravely spoken to me off the record. Former employees, environmental activists, families of those who had disappeared. Their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and desperate hope were fixed on me. They were waiting. They were vulnerable. They had placed their trust, their last shred of hope in me, in my voice, in my ability to speak the truth when they couldn't. In that moment, the weight of their silent plea, the sheer injustice of Mark's actions became unbearable. The fear, the humiliation, the doubt, they evaporated, replaced by an unshakable resolve. I had come too far. I had fought too hard. I had endured too much. Could not let him win, not when so many were depending on me. This wasn't just a turning point. It was the seismic shift I needed, the moment where the last vestiges of Mark's power over me shattered, leaving only an iron will forged in the fires of injustice. The roar of the crowd, the blinding flash of cameras, Mark's sneering face, it all faded into a dull background hum. In that instant, suspended between his venomous accusations and the expectant silence of the room, my world narrowed. It wasn't about the headlines anymore, or the exposé, or even the immediate triumph. It was about me, the little girl who had been told her feelings didn't matter, the young woman who had been systematically gaslighted into doubting her own reality, the traumatized survivor who had spent years rebuilding her shattered sense of self. Mark's words, his very presence, were designed to drag me back into that dark abyss of fear and self-doubt. But this time, something was different. This time, I could see his manipulation for what it was, a desperate, transparent attempt to maintain control. The familiar terror tried to claw its way back, but it was quickly eclipsed by a surge of pure, cold fury. My gaze drifted beyond Mark, past the journalists, to a woman in the third row. It was Elena, a former employee of Aegis Solutions, who had risked everything to provide me with crucial internal documents, her own life now hanging in the balance. Her eyes, wide and unwavering, held a profound mix of fear and desperate hope. In her gaze, I saw the reflection of every victim Mark had silenced, every life he had trampled. I saw the collective weight of their suffering, their silent pleas for justice. And in that moment, something shifted deep within me. The rage that had been simmering for so long transformed into a crystal-clear resolve. This wasn't just about my personal vendetta. It was about honoring the courage of people like Elena, about speaking for those who literally could not. It was about exposing the rot that festered beneath the surface of power, about ensuring that what happened to me and to so many others would not continue. A small, quiet voice in my head. The voice of the old, terrified Hazel whispered, "Run, just run. It's not worth it. He'll destroy you." But another voice, stronger, clearer, born from years of tireless work and painful healing, answered back, "No, not anymore." This was the moment of truth, the precipice upon which my entire journey had led me. Would I cower, allowing Mark to once again dictate my narrative and silence my voice? Or would I stand tall, reclaim my power, and unleash the truth that had been building inside me for so long? The choice was stark, terrifying, and undeniably mine. I thought of the countless hours spent poring over documents, the sacrifices I had made, the isolation I had endured to get to this very point. I remembered the therapy sessions, the raw vulnerability of admitting how deeply Mark had wounded me. I recalled the unwavering support of my therapist, Dr. Ramirez, who in our last session had said, "Hazel, your past doesn't define your present. Your courage does. You have a voice, and it's a powerful one. Don't let anyone take it from you again." Her words echoed in my mind, a beacon of strength in the swirling chaos. I had promised myself and her that I would never again allow myself to be diminished, to be silenced. That promise, forged in the crucible of my healing, was now my shield. My eyes met Mark's again. His smirk remained a smug mask of arrogance. He expected me to falter, to crumble under his public assault. He expected the fear, the doubt to paralyze me as it always had. But I wasn't that person anymore. The fear was still there, a faint tremor beneath my skin, but it was no longer in control. It was merely a backdrop against which my resolve shone brighter. A deep, steadying breath filled my lungs, and with it, a newfound clarity. The path ahead was fraught with danger, yes, but the path behind me, the one paved with silence and submission, was far more terrifying. This was not just a decision, it was an act of ultimate defiance. It was my declaration of independence from a past that had tried to shackle me. It was my unwavering commitment to the truth, no matter the personal cost. I would not allow Mark or anyone like him to dictate my narrative ever again. I would not let the suffering of others go unheard. My voice, once a tool for his manipulation, was now my weapon, my shield, and my legacy. The stage was mine. The truth was my ally, and I was ready to speak it loud and clear for all the world to hear. The time for reflection was over. The moment for action had arrived, and with it, the unwavering conviction to lay bare every ugly truth. 6. Execution and consequences. With an unyielding gaze fixed on Mark, I took a deep, fortifying breath and leaned into the microphone. The time for lies is over. I declared, my voice resonating with a power I didn't know I possessed. Mark Peterson is not just a concerned citizen. He is a senior executive at Aegis Solutions, and the evidence I am about to present will show his direct involvement in covering up a catastrophic environmental disaster and defrauding countless individuals. The room fell into an immediate stunned silence. You could feel the shift in the air, the collective intake of breath. Mark's smug demeanor vanished, replaced by a flicker of raw, undisguised fear in his eyes. He tried to speak, to interrupt, but my momentum was unstoppable. I wasted no time. I pulled up the meticulously organized slides on the giant screen behind me, each one a nail in Mark's coffin. I displayed the leaked financial ledgers highlighting the fraudulent transfers and offshore accounts. I projected authenticated emails detailing Mark's specific instructions to manipulate data and silence whistleblowers. I then showed irrefutable satellite imagery exposing the vast poisoned tracts of land that Aegis had claimed were remediated, juxtaposed with their falsified reports. As I spoke, I named names, cited dates, and connected every single damning dot, laying bare the full sickening scope of his and Aegis's corruption. The evidence was overwhelming, presented with such cold clinical precision that there was no room for doubt or denial. The transformation in the room was palpable. Reporters initially caught off guard now furiously typed notes and snapped photos. The hushed whispers turned into exclamations of disbelief and outrage. Mark, who moments ago stood tall and defiant, visibly shrank, his face draining of color. The arrogant smirk was replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. His desperate attempts to interject to shout over me were futile. His voice was swallowed by the rising tide of truth. The very public he had tried to manipulate, the media he had attempted to discredit, now bore witness to his undoing. Within minutes of my final damning reveal, the ballroom doors swung open. Uniformed officers whom I had discreetly alerted hours earlier entered the room, their eyes scanning for Mark. He tried to blend into the crowd, a pathetic last-ditch effort, but it was useless. They moved with calm efficiency, apprehending him right there in front of every flashing camera and every stunned reporter. His desperate protests and furious demands to know what this was about were drowned out by the clamor of justice finally served. The once untouchable Mark Peterson, architect of my trauma and countless others' suffering, was utterly and publicly humiliated, his empire of lies collapsing around him. It wasn't just a victory, it was a deeply satisfying moment of undeniable, irreversible justice. This devastating public exposure wasn't just the end of Mark's reign. It was the start of my true liberation, leading to a profound understanding of life's most crucial lessons. With Mark's public downfall, a profound sense of peace finally settled over me. The crushing weight of fear, the constant self-doubt he had instilled, simply lifted. It wasn't an overnight magical cure, but a steady, profound realization. I was truly free. Free from his shadow, free from the lingering anxiety of his threats, and most importantly, free to be unequivocally myself. My voice, once silenced and twisted, now resonated with authenticity and strength. I continued my work as an investigative journalist, driven not by past trauma, but by a deeper, more profound purpose: to be a voice for those who needed it most. My journey taught me invaluable lessons about self-worth and the absolute necessity of setting boundaries. No one has the right to dictate your truth, diminish your value, or control your narrative. Your dignity is non-negotiable. It's a difficult path to reclaim yourself after emotional abuse, but it's a journey worth every step. Speaking your truth, even when your voice shakes, is the most powerful act of self-love. It's about understanding that your experiences are valid. Your feelings are real, and your story deserves to be heard. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. If you've resonated with Hazel's story, or if you've faced similar struggles, know that you're not alone. Share this video, subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience, and perhaps share your own journey in the comments below. Your truth matters,